Pay attention to this security footage. Look closely at this woman wandering barefoot through the grocery store aisles. Notice how her movements are unsteady, almost dreamlike. See how she's barely dressed, confused, touching the shelves like she doesn't know where she is. Her eyes? They're not really seeing anything. This isn't someone who's lost. This is someone who's been taken from themselves. In just a few minutes, police will arrive and discover a woman who can't remember her own name, can't explain how she got here, can't recall the last 16 hours of her life. And what they're about to uncover will reveal a predator who'd been hiding in plain sight for years, and the woman who loved him enough to become an accomplice to his crimes. You know that feeling when you're at a party, having a good time, meeting new people, and everything just feels right? For 29-year-old Catherine Miller, that feeling was about to become her worst nightmare. Catherine was the kind of person everyone wanted to be around. She worked as a graphic designer at a small boutique firm in Riverside, Oregon, and she was good at what she did. Really good. Her colleagues described her as creative, warm, someone who'd stay late to help others meet their deadlines even when her own work was done. She had this infectious laugh that could fill a room, and she loved trying new restaurants, going to art exhibits, living life fully. On the evening of June 15, 2016, Catherine received an invitation that seemed perfectly innocent. Marcus Caldwell, a prominent real estate developer in town, was hosting a networking mixer at the Harbor View Hotel. Catherine had met Marcus a few times at community events. He was charming, successful, well-connected, the kind of person who could open doors for someone trying to grow their freelance client base. So when the invitation came, she didn't think twice about going. She told her roommate Jade she'd be home by midnight. "Just a quick networking thing," she'd said, slipping on her favorite silver earrings. "I'll text you if I end up grabbing dinner after." That text never came. The mixer at the Harbor View Hotel started at 7 p.m. Catherine arrived around 7:30, parking her blue Honda Civic in the hotel's garage. Security footage from the hotel lobby shows her walking in, looking professional in a navy dress and heels, her leather portfolio bag over her shoulder. She looked confident, happy even. The event was held in one of the hotel's smaller ballrooms, maybe 40 people total. Real estate agents, small business owners, a few lawyers, some entrepreneurs. Marcus played the perfect host, making introductions, keeping drinks flowing, telling stories that made everyone laugh. Multiple witnesses would later tell police that Catherine seemed to be having a great time. She'd been talking to a small group about a potential project, sipping white wine, completely at ease. Around 9 p.m., Marcus approached Catherine's group. "Having a good time?" he asked, that signature smile of his lighting up his face. He was holding a fresh glass of wine. "Here, let me get you a refill." "You look like you could use one." It seemed like such a small gesture. Friendly, normal. Catherine accepted the drink. Why wouldn't she? She was at a professional event, surrounded by people, talking to a respected member of the community. She took a sip, continued her conversation, laughed at someone's joke about the local housing market. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that her life was about to go dark. Here's what witnesses remembered. Catherine seemed fine until about 9:40. Then something shifted. She became quieter, her words a little slower. One woman, Jessica Torres, who'd been talking to Catherine about potentially collaborating on a project, noticed Catherine seemed suddenly tired. She said she felt a bit off, Jessica later told investigators. Said maybe she'd had the wine too fast on an empty stomach. She looked pale. By 9:50, Catherine was sitting down, saying she needed to catch her breath. Marcus was there almost immediately, concern written all across his face. "Are you okay? Do you need some air?" Several people heard him offer to call her an Uber to make sure she got home safely. Catherine, now visibly disoriented, nodded. I think I need to go home," she managed to say. Security footage shows Marcus helping Catherine toward the exit at 9:57 p.m. She's leaning on him, her movements uncoordinated. To anyone watching, it looked like a good Samaritan helping an intoxicated guest get home safely. Marcus even waved to a few people as they left, that concerned but in control expression on his face. That was the last time anyone at the party saw Catherine Miller conscious. When Catherine didn't come home that night, her roommate Jade initially wasn't too worried. Maybe Catherine had met someone, maybe she decided to stay with a friend. But when noon rolled around the next day and Catherine still wasn't answering her phone, Jade's concern turned to panic. She called Catherine's parents. She called the hospital. Finally, at 2:15 p.m. on June 16th, she called the police. Officer Denise Hammond took the missing persons report. 29-year-old woman, last seen at the Harborview Hotel the previous evening, not answering her phone, completely out of character. Hammond knew this wasn't just someone sleeping off a hangover somewhere. This was wrong. But here's what made it even more horrific. While police were taking that missing person report, while Jade was describing what Catherine had been wearing and showing officers recent photos, Catherine was already wandering through Morrison's grocery store 30 miles away in the small town of Ashford with no idea who she was or how she'd gotten there. The 911 call came in at 3:21 p.m. 911, what's your emergency? Hi, yes, I'm the manager at Morrison's Grocery on Elm Street, and we have a woman here who's, I don't know how to describe this. She's not wearing shoes, she's barely dressed, and she seems really confused. She can't tell us her name or where she lives. I think she might need medical help. Officer Paul Chen arrived at Morrison's at 3:28 p.m. What he found stopped him cold. A young woman, barefoot, wearing only a light-colored skirt that was torn and dirty. Her arms showed fresh scratches and bruises. She was wandering through the aisles, touching products like she'd never seen them before, her eyes unfocused and distant. When Chen approached her, she looked at him but didn't seem to register his uniform or understand that he was there to help. "Ma'am, can you tell me your name?" Chen asked gently. Catherine stared at him. Her mouth opened, then closed. Nothing came out. She touched her own face as if checking that it was real, then looked down at her hands like they belonged to someone else. "Do you know where you are?" Silence. Just that vacant, lost expression. Chen immediately called for an ambulance. While waiting, he tried to keep Catherine calm, but she seemed trapped in some kind of dissociative state. She'd walk a few steps, stop, look around like she was trying to solve a puzzle she couldn't quite see. Store employees had given her a blanket, which she clutched without seeming to understand why she needed it. The paramedics arrived and began their assessment. Catherine's vital signs were stable, but something was clearly very wrong. One of the paramedics, Miguel Santos, had seen this before. This wasn't alcohol. This wasn't any recreational drug someone took willingly. This looked like a serious drug overdose, specifically the kind of sedatives used to incapacitate people. At the hospital, blood tests confirmed what Santos suspected. Catherine had massive amounts of Rohypnol and GHB in her system. The levels were so high that doctors were genuinely shocked she was alive. These weren't party drugs gone wrong. This was a deliberate attempt to render someone completely unconscious and compliant. Detective Lisa Morgan caught the case. She'd been with Riverside PD for 12 years, and she'd worked enough sexual assault cases to know exactly what she was looking at. This wasn't random. Someone had drugged Catherine Miller, and they'd done it with enough precision to suggest this wasn't their first time. The first break came when they matched the missing person report filed by Jade to the Jane Doe found at Morrison's. Catherine was still in the hospital, slowly regaining some cognitive function, but she had zero memory of anything after accepting that glass of wine from Marcus Caldwell. The last 16 hours were just gone. Erased. When Detective Morgan interviewed Catherine 2 days later, the young woman broke down. "I can't remember," she kept saying, tears streaming down her face. "I've tried and tried, but there's nothing there. It's like someone cut those hours out of my life. What happened to me?" Morgan had to be the one to tell her. The hospital's rape kit had come back positive. Catherine had been sexually assaulted while unconscious. The defensive wounds on her arms suggested that at some point, even in her drugged state, she'd tried to fight back. But the drugs had been too strong. Her body had been violated while her mind was trapped in chemically induced darkness. The detective's next stop was Marcus Caldwell. Marcus lived in one of those modern estates on the outskirts of Riverside, all glass and steel with a view of the river. He answered the door in expensive casual wear, that same charming smile ready. "Detective Morgan, right? Come in, come in. I heard about Catherine. It's just awful. How is she doing?" Morgan watched him carefully as she asked her questions. Marcus had his story perfectly rehearsed. Yes, Catherine had seemed unwell at the party. Yes, he'd helped her to the lobby and called her a rideshare. No, he didn't remember which company. It was just whoever showed up first through one of those apps. He'd waited with her until the car arrived, made sure the driver knew she wasn't feeling well, and then gone back to the party. He had a dozen witnesses who could confirm he'd returned to the event and stayed until almost midnight. "Did you get the driver's information?" Morgan asked. "I didn't think to," Marcus said, his face a picture of regret. "I just wanted to make sure she got home safely. Should I have? God, I should have gotten a name or something." But when Morgan checked with every rideshare company operating in Riverside that night, there was no record of any pickup at the Harbor View Hotel around 10 p.m. No driver, no trip, no GPS data. Nothing. Marcus Caldwell had lied. Here's the thing about investigations like this. Sometimes the evidence comes from where you least expect it. 3 days after Catherine was found, Marcus filed an insurance claim. His silver Mercedes had been stolen from his garage the night of the party, taken sometime between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., he claimed. He'd woken up, gone to leave for work, and found it gone. Detective Morgan didn't believe in coincidences. A woman drugged at Marcus's party and his car stolen the same night? She requested surveillance footage from every gas station, traffic camera, and business between Riverside and Ashford. And that's when they found it. A gas station 12 miles outside of Ashford had caught a silver Mercedes pulling in at 3:05 p.m. on June 16th, just 16 minutes before Catherine appeared at Morrison's grocery. The driver was a woman wearing large sunglasses and a baseball cap. She'd gone inside, purchased 2 bottles of water, and left. The footage wasn't clear enough for facial recognition, but Morgan could see that the woman was thin, had dark hair pulled back, and moved with purpose. The Mercedes was found 2 days later in a downtown parking garage, wiped completely clean. No prints, no DNA, nothing. Someone had been very thorough. But who was the woman driving Marcus's stolen car? Morgan dug deeper into Marcus's life, and that's when she discovered Dr. Elena Hartley. Elena was a 41-year-old psychiatrist with her own private practice, specializing in trauma therapy. She and Marcus had been in a relationship for 4 years. They kept it relatively quiet. Marcus was divorced, Elena had never married, and they both valued their privacy. Friends described them as devoted to each other, maybe even a little codependent. When Morgan brought Elena in for questioning, the psychiatrist was calm, professional, concerned. "Of course I want to help in any way I can," she said. "What happened to that poor woman is horrific." "Where were you on June 16th between noon and 4 p.m.? "I was at home catching up on paperwork. I had a light patient load that day." "Anyone who can confirm that?" Elena shook her head. "I live alone. Marcus was at his office, I believe." "And your car?" "Parked in my driveway all day." Morgan let Elena go, but something gnawed at her. She requested phone records, credit card statements, anything that could place Elena somewhere other than her house that afternoon. And buried in the cell tower data, she found it. Elena's phone had pinged off towers along the exact route between Riverside and Ashford, perfectly timed to match the Mercedes' movements. The detective went back through the gas station footage frame by frame, and there, on the woman's right wrist as she handed cash to the clerk, was a distinctive bracelet, a silver chain with small turquoise stones. Morgan pulled up Elena's social media. In a photo from 3 months earlier, Elena was wearing the exact same bracelet. They had their second suspect. When Detective Morgan and her team arrested Marcus Caldwell and Dr. Elena Hartley on June 30th, 2016, the community was stunned. Marcus, the successful real estate developer, Elena, the trauma therapist who'd helped so many people heal, it seemed impossible. But when detectives searched Marcus's home, they found a horror show hidden behind elegant decor. In a locked drawer in Marcus's office, they discovered an external hard drive containing dozens of videos. Young women, unconscious or barely conscious, being assaulted. Different women, different dates, going back 3 years. Some of the victims were identifiable. Many were not. All of them had clearly been drugged into submission. The oldest video was dated September 2013. Marcus Caldwell had been doing this for years. Among Marcus's files, investigators also found what they called his party planning documents, detailed notes about which women he'd invited to various events, their approximate sizes, their drinking preferences, notes about whether they'd mentioned having boyfriends or close family who'd notice if they disappeared for a day. He'd been hunting, selecting, stalking his victims with the precision of someone who saw it all as a game. Catherine Miller had been victim number 14 that they could confirm. But here's what everyone wanted to know. Where did Elena fit into all of this? Under interrogation, Marcus initially tried to protect her. Elena knew nothing, he insisted. This was all me. She's innocent. I used her. She never knew what I was doing. But the evidence said otherwise. Elena's phone records showed she'd called Marcus at 11:30 p.m. on June 15th, right around the time Catherine would have been at his house, assaulted and overdosing on the drugs. The call lasted 7 minutes. At midnight, Marcus called Elena back. 2 minutes. Then at 12:45 a.m., another call from Elena to Marcus, 14 minutes. When confronted with this timeline, faced with the GPS data that put her driving Marcus's car, shown the surveillance footage, Elena's calm facade finally cracked. "He called me panicking," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He said there was a woman at his house who was having a reaction to something, that she was seizing, that he thought she might die. He begged me to come help. I'm a doctor. What was I supposed to do?" "You could have called 911, Morgan said. "I should have. I know I should have." Elena's hands were shaking now, but Marcus was terrified. He said if she died in his house, his whole life would be over. And I just kept thinking, if I can get there, if I can stabilize her, maybe we can get her to a hospital and no one has to know how this happened. "So you went to his house?" Elena nodded. Catherine was on the floor in his bedroom. She was barely breathing. I thought she was going to die right there. I got her stabilized enough that she could breathe properly, but she was completely non-responsive. I told Marcus we needed to get her to a hospital immediately. "But you didn't." Marcus said the hospital would ask questions. They'd do tests. They'd find the drugs in her system, and he'd be arrested. He'd lose everything. Elena's voice broke. He kept saying, "Please, Elena, you have to help me. I made a mistake. I gave her too much, but she'll be fine in a few hours. Please don't let my whole life fall apart over one mistake." One mistake. As if this was the first time. As if there weren't 13 other women before Catherine. What Elena didn't know, what Marcus had hidden from her, was that this wasn't an isolated incident gone wrong. Marcus had shown her the frightened man she'd fallen in love with, the vulnerable side he kept hidden from everyone else, and she'd believed him. She'd wanted to save him. "So I made a choice," Elena continued, tears streaming down her face now. "I thought, if I can get her away from here, somewhere public where someone will find her and get her help, then she'll be safe and Marcus won't be implicated. I dressed her, barely, I know, but I was panicking. I drove her in Marcus's car because mine was almost out of gas. I drove to Ashford because it was far enough away that no one would connect her back to Riverside immediately. And I left her at that grocery store because I knew someone would find her quickly and call for help." "You left a drugged, assaulted woman, barely dressed and barefoot, wandering around a grocery store." "I thought I was saving her life." Elena's voice rose to almost a shout. "I thought Marcus had made a terrible mistake and I was fixing it." "I thought I was protecting both of them." But Detective Morgan wasn't buying it. "You're a psychiatrist, Dr. Hartley. You specialize in trauma. You knew what had happened to Catherine wasn't a mistake. You knew those drugs, at those levels, don't happen by accident. You knew she'd been assaulted. And instead of getting her immediate medical help, instead of calling the police, you prioritized protecting your boyfriend. The silence that followed was damning. Here's what investigators pieced together from phone records, GPS data, and eventually from Marcus's own confession. Marcus had been drugging and assaulting women at his events for years. He'd refined his technique, the friendly gesture of getting someone a drink, the precise dosing that would render them compliant but not immediately unconscious, the careful timing to get them out of public spaces before the drugs fully kicked in. He'd assault them, and they'd wake up hours later with no memory, no proof, no way to know for certain what had happened to them except for that horrible, empty feeling that something was very, very wrong. Elena hadn't known about the pattern. She really had thought June 15th was an isolated incident, a terrible mistake by the man she loved. But her choice to prioritize his freedom over Catherine's immediate safety, her choice to dump an injured, traumatized woman far from the scene of the crime rather than get her proper medical care, those choices made her an accomplice. The break that solidified the case against Marcus came from his own arrogance. Remember that security footage from Morrison's grocery showing Catherine wandering through the aisles? Detective Morgan subpoenaed the store's entire surveillance system, not just the footage from inside. The exterior cameras had captured Elena's arrival in the silver Mercedes at 3:16 p.m. They'd caught her helping Catherine out of the car, and the footage showed Catherine collapsing against Elena, completely unable to support her own weight. Elena had half-dragged, half-carried her to the entrance, propped her inside, and left. If Elena had really thought Catherine was fine and just needed to sleep it off, why was the woman unable to walk? Why was she non-responsive? The footage contradicted everything Elena claimed about Catherine's condition. More devastating for Marcus, when forensic analysts examined the videos on his hard drive, they found metadata showing the files had been accessed repeatedly. He'd been watching his own assaults, reliving them. This wasn't about losing control. This was about control being the entire point. And here's what haunted everyone involved in the investigation. Some of the women in those videos were recognizable. Over the next few weeks, Detective Morgan had the heartbreaking task of contacting 12 other women who'd attended Marcus's events over the years. Women who'd woken up in their cars or at home with missing hours and vague, terrible feelings that something had happened to them. Women who'd tried to convince themselves they'd just had too much to drink, who'd carried that doubt and self-blame for years. Marcus Caldwell had stolen pieces of their lives, their autonomy, their sense of safety in the world. And he'd done it with a smile, with charm, with the respectability that comes from money and status. The trial began in March 2017 and lasted 6 weeks. Catherine Miller testified, as did 7 other victims who'd been identified from the videos. Their testimony was devastating. Story after story of missing hours, confusion, shame, the horrible uncertainty of knowing something had happened but having no concrete memories to hold on to. The prosecution played that security footage from Morrison's grocery, Catherine wandering barefoot and disoriented through the aisles, touching products like she'd never seen them before, completely lost in her own hometown. The jury watched in silence as this young woman who'd gone to a professional networking event ended up abandoned in a grocery store 30 miles away, unable to remember her own name. Elena took the stand in her own defense, weeping as she described her choice that night. "I thought I was helping," she said over and over. "I thought I was doing the right thing." The jury didn't agree. Marcus Caldwell was convicted on 14 counts of first-degree sexual assault, 14 counts of administering drugs with intent to commit a felony, and 1 count of attempted murder, because the level of drugs given to Catherine could easily have killed her. He was sentenced to 45 years to life. Dr. Elena Hartley was convicted of conspiracy to commit sexual assault, kidnapping, obstruction of justice, and tampering with evidence. She received 18 years. Her medical license was permanently revoked. Catherine Miller speaks publicly now about the epidemic of drug-facilitated sexual assault. She's working with legislators to strengthen laws around drink tampering and to mandate better training for healthcare providers in recognizing the signs of drug-facilitated assault. She's testified before state committees about the need for longer statutes of limitations for these crimes, given that victims often don't realize what's happened to them until long after the physical evidence is gone. "I lost 16 hours of my life," Catherine said in a victim impact statement. 16 hours where I had no agency, no control, no voice, and I'll never get those hours back. But I can use my voice now to make sure what happened to me and to those other women leads to change. I can make sure Marcus Caldwell's actions aren't forgotten. Catherine has also become an advocate for victims who struggle with the unique trauma of having gaps in their memory. "There's this special kind of horror," she explains, "in knowing something terrible happened to you but having no memory of it. Your mind tries to fill in the blanks, and sometimes the imagination is worse than reality. You're left haunted by something you can't even fully remember." Today, Catherine lives in a different city, with a new job and a fresh start. She says she's reclaimed her life, though she still struggles with trusting people and attending social events. She's in therapy, working through the complex trauma of what was done to her. But she's also powerful now, in a way she wasn't before. She's someone who survived, who refused to let shame and fear define her story. The other victims have chosen various paths. Some speak publicly like Catherine. Others have chosen privacy, healing in their own ways. All of them have had to grapple with the betrayal of a man who weaponized social trust and respectability to commit his crimes. Marcus Caldwell will likely die in prison. Dr. Elena Hartley will serve her sentence and be released in her late 50s, branded as a convicted felon who prioritized her relationship over a victim's life. And somewhere in evidence, storage sits that grainy surveillance footage from Morrison's grocery, a young woman wandering barefoot through everyday aisles, lost in a nightmare she couldn't even recognize as her own life. It's an image that reminds us that monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like respected community members. Sometimes they look like trusted professionals. Sometimes they're the people who seem the most helpful, the most charming, the most normal. Catherine Miller's 16 missing hours exposed a predator who'd hidden in plain sight for years. Her courage in speaking about what happened, even without being able to remember it, helped ensure that Marcus Caldwell's other victims found justice too. She turned her stolen hours into a voice that refuses to be silenced.